I don't even know where to start because honestly, this whole thing feels like a nightmare I keep waking up from. My name's Jake, and I was married to Emily for just over a year. We got married right after I finished my master's degree, and we had this perfect vision of a future. At least I thought we did. She was smart, beautiful, ambitious, and she had that fiery attitude that I thought was just her being strong. But looking back, I realize I was blind to a lot of red flags early on. She could be bitchy, dismissive, and she lied so easily I should have seen it coming. Still, I wanted to believe in us, in her, in that fairy tale idea that love was enough. Things started to change a few months into the marriage. She became distant, often distracted, texting someone constantly, but when I asked about it, she'd brush me off with some excuse about work or her friends. I figured maybe I was just paranoid, or maybe I was overthinking everything. I was trying to be a good husband, supportive, attentive, the guy who does everything right. But I noticed small things, her phone vibrating. At odd hours, her avoiding me when I tried to cuddle her after a long day, and her lying about where she was going when she'd disappear for hours on end. At first, I dismissed it, telling myself she was just stressed or busy. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then came the day I found out she was cheating on me. I swear it was so accidental, but it hit me like a freight train. We were on our honeymoon in Hawaii. Sweet, perfect setup, right? I was excited, thinking we'd finally get some quality time after all the wedding chaos. We were staying at this fancy resort, and Emily, of course, was acting a little strange, more distant than usual, checking her phone constantly. I remember catching her sneaking a text at dinner, quickly hiding her phone when I looked over. That night, I decided to do the classic. I wanted to see her messages. I waited until she was asleep, and I grabbed her phone, thinking maybe I'd find some reassurance or at least an explanation. What I saw was worse than I could have imagined. There were messages, flirty, explicit, just downright disgusting, between her and my best friend, Mike. They'd been texting for months, apparently, planning this entire thing right under my nose. I saw how they laughed about me, how they talked about their sex sessions, how she called him the one who really gets her. I couldn't believe it. My best friend, someone I trusted with my life, was screwing my wife while I was trying to build a future with her. I felt like my heart stopped for a second, then started pounding so loudly I thought the walls would crack. I was furious, devastated, humiliated. How could she do this to me? How could she lie so easily? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut and stabbed in the back at the same time. I stayed up all night staring at her phone, trying to process what I saw. Every thought was a blur of betrayal, anger, sadness. When she finally woke up, I confronted her, my voice trembling, my hands clenched into fists. She tried to deny it at first, calling it just a joke, nothing serious, or blaming it on stress and loneliness. She looked me in the eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that she loved me and would never do anything to ruin us, but I knew better. I had found her secret and I couldn't unsee it. That moment changed everything. I realized I'd been living in a lie and I had to figure out what to do next, whether I could forgive her or if I'd lost everything I ever wanted. After I saw those messages, everything inside me just shattered. I felt numb but also burning with rage, a cocktail of betrayal that I couldn't shake off. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, replaying everything I'd learned, trying to understand how she could do this right under my nose during what was supposed to be our happiest time. I kept asking myself, how long has this been going on? How many times did she lie to me? How blind was I? It was like my whole world had turned upside down in a matter of hours. The next morning, I knew I had to confront her again, this time fully prepared for whatever lies she'd throw at me. I sat her down in our hotel room, my mind racing with questions and anger. When I brought up the messages, her face twisted into this irritated, bitchy smirk. She looked at me with this condescending attitude, like I was just some inconvenience she'd deal with. "Oh, come on, Jake," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not a big deal. Honestly, you're overreacting. It's just sex, and honestly, you're acting like I cheated on you with the whole world, not just one guy." That was her go-to lie, blame shifting, minimizing everything to make herself seem innocent. I remember feeling my blood boil. How could she sit there and act like she hadn't betrayed me? Like I was just some fool who didn't deserve honesty? I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I knew everything, the messages, the plan, the lies. And I saw her defenses crumble for a second, her fake bitchiness slipping away to reveal genuine panic. But then she snapped back into her usual attitude, throwing out more lies. It was just sex, Jake. It meant nothing. Mike and I are just friends. You have to believe me. She kept saying she was stressed, lonely, and that I never paid enough attention to her. Honestly, I was just stunned. The woman I married, who once told me she loved me more than anything, was now lying through her teeth, accusing me of not caring enough while she was out screwing my best friend. The emotional roller coaster hit me hard. I went from furious to devastated in seconds. I felt a deep, aching sadness I couldn't quite handle. How could someone I trusted so completely turn out to be so selfish, so manipulative? I felt betrayed, not just by her but by Mike too. The worst part was the feeling that I'd been played from the start, like I was just some fool who thought I had a partner but was actually just a pawn in their sick game. Still, I knew I couldn't just lose my shit and go nuclear. I had to think this through. But every time I looked at her, I saw someone I no longer knew. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a small mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown betrayal that cut me to the core. Over the next few hours, I started to piece together what I was going to do. I didn't want a quick, emotional reaction. No, I needed to be strategic. I decided I'd gather more evidence, see if she slipped up again, maybe even talk to Mike directly. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. I was planning how I'd handle the fallout, what kind of revenge I wanted, if I wanted to forgive or just walk away. But right now, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in that room with her, not after what I'd learned. I packed my bag, left her standing there with that smug little grin she always wore when she thought she was in control, and I headed out to clear my head. I needed a plan. I needed to figure out how to make her pay for this, and honestly, I didn't have much hope for anything but heartbreak. I spent the next couple of days in a daze, trying to process everything I'd discovered. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, not just to her cheating, but to her entire personality. Emily had always been bitchy, quick to lie and manipulate, but I convinced myself that was just who she was. Now I saw it clearly. She was a liar, a schemer, a user. It hurt more than I expected, knowing I'd been played so easily, that someone I loved and trusted had been secretly plotting with my best friend behind my back for months. I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself, though. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I started digging through her things, looking for more proof, screenshots, texts, emails. I wanted to make sure I had enough to expose her completely. While digging through her laptop, I found some more messages, more evidence of how long they'd been planning this. They'd even talked about how to hide it from me, how to make sure I never found out until it was too late. I felt a sickening mixture of rage and disgust. These two had been plotting during my honeymoon. How sick is that? They acted like they were untouchable, like they could keep lying and cheating without consequences. Then I remembered something I saw in her phone that made my blood run cold. There was a quick message from her saying, "I can't wait for tonight. Mike's coming over and we're going to have a real good time." It was like a punch to the gut. They'd been planning secret meetups, sneaking around while I was just blissfully unaware, trying to make our marriage work. That moment I realized this wasn't some one-time mistake. This was a full-blown affair, a betrayal that had been going on for months, and it was all happening during what I thought was the most special time of my life, the honeymoon. I felt sick. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face, knowing exactly what she was doing? I also found out more about Mike. Turns out he had been a close friend of ours for years. I always thought he was a stand-up guy, someone who had my back. But now I saw he was just as rotten. He had been feeding her lies, encouraging her, probably even pushing her to cheat. I wondered how long he'd been planning to do this, how many times they'd sneaked off behind my back. The betrayal didn't just hurt. It felt like a punch to the stomach every time I thought about it. How the hell could my wife cheat on me with my best friend? That was a betrayal I don't think I'll ever get over. But part of me knew I couldn't just sit there feeling sorry for myself. If I was going to do something, I had to be smart about it. I started planning my next move. I knew I had enough evidence now to confront her properly, to show her that I wasn't just some fool who didn't see it coming. I also needed to think about what I wanted out of this, whether I could forgive her or if I was better off walking away. Honestly, I was leaning toward cutting all ties. The trust was shattered beyond repair, and I didn't want to keep living in this toxic mess. I decided I'd wait for her to come home that evening, then lay everything out, confront her in the harshest way possible, expose her lies, and see how she'd react. I was done playing nice. I wanted her to face the reality of what she'd done, to see her realize she had lost me completely. So I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I'd never felt this angry, this betrayed in my life. I thought I knew my wife, but I'd been blind all along. All those late nights, all her little lies, they were just part of her game. I wasn't sure how this would end, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The truth had to come out no matter how ugly it was. And if she thought she could lie her way out of this, she was dead wrong. I was done being her fool. That evening, I waited for her to come back from whatever errand she was on. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. I was too busy playing the scene in my head, trying to figure out what I'd say, how I'd look her in the eyes and lay it all out. When she finally walked through the door, I could see the smirk on her face, the same smug, bitchy smirk she'd always wear when she thought she was in control. But this time, it was different. I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of it. I called her into the living room and made her sit down. My hands were trembling, but my voice was steady. I told her I knew everything about her affair with Mike, the months of planning, the texts, the secret meetups. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely stunned. But that quickly turned into that same dismissive attitude she always had, like she thought she could just talk her way out of it. "Jake, you're overreacting," she snapped, crossing her arms. "It's just sex, and honestly, it doesn't mean anything. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I cut her off. I showed her the messages I'd found, laid out every piece of evidence I had kept hidden. Her face turned red with anger, then with frustration. She tried to deny it, saying, "That's not what it looks like," or "Mike means nothing to me," but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I'd seen enough, that I knew she'd been lying to my face for months. I asked her how she could be so callous, so selfish, to cheat right during our honeymoon, while I was supposed to be the happiest I've ever been. That's when her true colors really came out. She started crying, but it wasn't genuine. It was that manipulative cry she'd perfected, tears to make me think she was sorry, make me doubt my own judgment. "Jake, I swear I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, voice trembling but still full of that bitchy attitude. "Mike and I are just friends, it's not a big deal. We're just exploring, you're being paranoid." Those words hit me like a slap. Paranoid. After what I saw, I knew her game now. She was good at lying, but I wasn't going to let her twist everything around to make herself look innocent. I felt a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside me. I was furious at her for betraying me so thoroughly, disgusted by how she tried to justify her actions, and deeply hurt that she'd been sneaking around with my best friend behind my back. I looked at her and realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I told her this was the end, that I wasn't going to stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I told her she was a manipulative, selfish woman, and that she'd lost me for good. She kept trying to deny everything, but I knew she was only fooling herself. I made it clear I was done, that I was leaving her that night, no turning back. I packed a bag and walked out, leaving her sitting there, stunned, angry, and still trying to justify herself. I didn't want any more of her lies. I just wanted her to understand that I knew the truth now, and it was over. That night, I slept in a hotel, feeling like I'd lost part of myself, but also feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. I finally saw her for who she really was, and I knew I'd never be able to trust her again. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I'd have to rebuild from the wreckage of her betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, and a strange sense of relief I couldn't quite understand at the time. I knew I made the right decision to walk away, but that didn't make the pain any easier. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smirk, heard her lies, and thought about Mike, that supposed best friend I once trusted with everything. It felt like my entire world had crumbled in those few hours, and I was left, picking up the pieces of a life I thought I knew. I spent a lot of time reflecting, questioning everything, my judgment, my relationship, whether I could ever trust again. I thought about how she always played the victim, how she lied so convincingly, and how she manipulated everyone around her to serve her own interests. And I realized something else. She'd been like this for a long time. That bitchy attitude, her lies, her constant scheming, it was all part of her personality. She never really loved me. She just liked the idea of having someone around, someone to control, someone to use. And Mike, I convinced myself he was just a sick, selfish bastard who was just as guilty as she was. I decided I had to do something about it. I couldn't just let her get away with it, not without making her pay in some way. I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences. So I started plotting my revenge, not in some petty way, but in a way that would hit her where it hurt, make her regret ever crossing me. First, I knew I had to cut all ties with her. No contact, no explanations, no second chances. I filed for divorce, got a restraining order, and made sure she couldn't manipulate or lie her way back into my life. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, that I was done being her fool. Next, I reached out to some of her friends, people who knew her well. I told them the truth, not to bash her, but to warn them she was capable of this kind of betrayal. I wanted to expose her manipulative nature, so no one else would fall for her lies. Felt good to finally be honest about what she truly was, someone who lied, cheated, and schemed without a second thought. I also started working on myself, going to therapy, rediscovering my passions, trying to rebuild my confidence. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to move on for my own sake. In some strange way, I started to feel a little relieved. I realized that I wasn't the idiot who was manipulated and betrayed. I was just someone who loved too much, and she took advantage of that. Now I was taking control back. I knew I'd never forget what she did, but I also knew I wouldn't let it define me. The betrayal was brutal, but it woke me up. It taught me to be more cautious, to trust my instincts, and most importantly, to never ignore the warning signs again. I learned that some people are just fundamentally selfish. They'll lie, cheat, and manipulate anyone to get what they want. Looking back, I wish her the best, honestly. Not because I still love her, but because I hope she finally realizes the damage she caused. I hope one day she regrets what she did, that she feels some ounce of guilt for tearing apart the marriage and friendship we once had. I don't harbor hatred anymore, just a deep disappointment. And I'm moving forward. That's what she never understood, that you can't build anything on lies and betrayal. And I'll never let myself be that naive again. I'll rebuild. I'll trust again, but never blindly. And I'll always remember the lesson. Love isn't enough if someone is willing to destroy everything for a quick fuck and a lie. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize how much this whole ordeal changed me. It's like I lost a part of myself during that betrayal, but I also found a strength I didn't know I had. I've come to accept that some people are just fundamentally broken, selfish, manipulative, incapable of genuine love. Emily was one of those people. I used to think love could fix everything, but now I see that it can't if the other person is determined to lie and cheat their way through life. The biggest lesson I've learned is trusting your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs, no matter how much you want to believe in the best. Because sometimes, the truth is uglier than any lie you could imagine. I also learned that revenge isn't about hurting her back, at least, not in a petty way. It's about taking control of your life again, reclaiming your dignity, and making sure the other person faces the consequences of their actions in a way that you define. For me, that was walking away, cutting ties, exposing her lies, and focusing on rebuilding myself. I've started dating again, and honestly, it's a slow process. I'm cautious now, but I also refuse to let her betrayal define my future. I want to believe in genuine love, not just the illusion of it. That means being smarter about who I trust and not rushing into anything. I don't hate Emily or Mike anymore. I just feel sorry for them. They're stuck in their own selfish worlds, incapable of true happiness or loyalty. I hope she finally finds some peace, but I won't be part of her twisted game anymore. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Don't ignore the red flags. Love is important, but it's not enough if the other person is fundamentally dishonest. Trust yourself, stay vigilant, and never settle for less than honesty and respect. I'd rather be alone than in a marriage built on lies. And I'll keep moving forward stronger and wiser than before. Because at the end of the day, the real victory is knowing I didn't let her betrayal break me. I used it to become better, smarter, and more cautious about who I let into my life. That's the only way to truly win.